I'm Mariana Cordier. Welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. The Lobby Corps of the League of Women Voters of the United States visits Congress to advocate for issues of importance to the League. Elaine Apter, the co-president of the Maryland League, is part of the Lobby Corps and will tell us about it. April is Minority Health Month with the theme of Parenting for Health Equity, which is a vision for improved outcomes. José Luis Diaz from CCI Health and Wellness Services will explain. This year, the Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless, MCCH, will honor the first responders for their work on behalf of the homeless among us. Debbie Ezrin from MCCH has the story. This station, Montgomery Community Media, MCM, is busy planning a Youth Mental Wellness Symposium for May 15th and running a contest to create a PSA to advertise the upcoming meeting. Denise Fredericks from MCM will fill us in on what's happening. Elaine, hi. Welcome back to the show.
It's great to be back.
Yes, tell us. You were saying that you're going to try to make advertisers be honest?
We're trying.
Tell us about it.
There's a bill now up in the Senate. There is also a comparable bill in the House, and it's called the Honest Ads Act, and it deals with political advertising and online services. Now,
what does that exactly mean? I mean, I know a lot of the freedom of speech constitutional issues will, spark quite a lot of...
But the Supreme Court has said that the citizens have a right to have honest and accurate information in order to get them to vote. And so that is very, very important. So we have that part of it. The other thing is there is also already rules for much of the media, and that's newspapers, television, cable, and things like that. But online services have kept saying they weren't a media company, we shouldn't be controlled.
And what's Facebook or any of these large, Facebook was in the news quite a bit because of the past presidential election. Do we know what their position is?
Well, they say they're trying, is what it is. But this bill would put some of these rules into law. And some of the things it would do is basically, one, make sure that whoever the sponsor is, the person or the group, is very visible on the ad. The text cannot be smaller than the rest of the ad, and there needs to be a link or some way to get more information about who's sponsoring the ad easily available from the ad.
Well, but what is the repercussion in the bill if, for instance, they discover, after the fact that perhaps this person or group or country is not who they say they are?
Yeah, there are some things we don't know exactly what it is as far as what's going to happen to them. But one of the interesting things about the bill is that, one, the online services must keep a digital copy of the ad. They must have the information on the sponsor, who it's targeted to, what they're charging the people who are buying the ad, and so what the issues are. And then the other thing that's going on is that this information must be kept. It must be reported to the Federal Election Commission, who must then make it available on some kind of a platform for research. Because right now, anybody basically that wants to has access to a newspaper, cable, television. But if you are putting an ad on the internet and keying it into a very, very small portion of the population, not everybody sees that ad. So
Elaine,
Correct, yeah.
this work sounds fascinating. I can't imagine you've got a giant team. Well, I would love to imagine that you have a giant team of people that are working on this. Is there some way that the rest of us who would love to see the same thing can get involved or help out?
Thank you for asking. What you can do is call your congressman or your senator and say the Honest Ads Act is very important for the elections, the transparency and accuracy of our next elections, and to please support it and pass it and make sure the Federal Elections Commission follows through with doing what they're supposed to do. The other thing is it's retroactive, if it passes, to January 2018, which would cover this primary election season.
Process.
So really, it is important for people to get behind it and say, we really want to know what's going on the internet. We
of
want
the elected
transparency.
officials, who's already behind the bill?
Well, we've got McCain, we've got Virginia,
Mark Warner?
Warner, Kohlbacher in the Senate, and it's on the House, I'm not sure yet. So it is co-sponsored and bipartisan, and we need, that's the other thing is, if you talk to your senator or congressman, say you want them to co-sponsor the bill, not only support the bill, you want this bill to be co-sponsored. And the easiest way would be the Honest Ads Act. That would get them right too.
So you
Elaine,
have-
is this meant to cover federal elections as well as state and local elections?
Yeah, any online services.
And do you know, I know you were talking about which ones have sponsored so far, do you have any sense of the Montgomery County congressional delegation, where they stand on this?
Usually not. We haven't spoken to them yet. That's our job, but
That's the last word.
okay. But we will be after them. But usually they're pretty good on this.
Yeah.
So now we move over to José Luis Diaz. Tell us about health equity. That's a new term for me. What does that mean?
Well, it's a new term for a lot of people in the different jurisdictions, but it's something that has been happening throughout the country for the last several years. In fact, Montgomery County is pretty well advanced in the conversation about health equity. We have Montgomery, Healthy Montgomery, which is the coalition of people who are trying to move towards health equity in the county. But it really is the idea to talk about health disparities in a way that we can eradicate them. We no longer talk about just the social determinants of health. We talk about all the other things that come into play. It's one thing to have access to incredible resources, healthcare. We have wonderful community health centers like us that are a resource to the different communities. But it's another thing to have the transportation to get to those health centers. It's another thing to have the housing that is near where you work or where you play or where you pray. Also, we talk a lot about the food deserts that sometimes when we overdevelop our regions, they get created. So,
How are you getting the word out?
well, jurisdictions themselves are taking the lead in starting those conversations. Montgomery County has Healthy Montgomery. Prince George's County just started a coalition subgroup that is focused only on health equity, and many other jurisdictions in the nation have led the charge. One of the things that's really important is that community health centers like us, who have been around for 50 years dealing with the issues that affect our most disadvantaged members of the communities, have to be part of that conversation as well. We have the models, we've put it in place, we have best practices. And so we need the county leadership and the agencies to sort of coalesce everyone together. It's not just the health centers, it's the transportation folks, it's the zoning people who say yes or no to projects, is the workforce development folks, and we talk about living wages, safety.
So health is beyond just disease.
It's just
That's the key,
and
yeah.
that's the thing that we are not doing quite well. We can treat people. We can treat symptoms. Community health centers have a
And not
team-based.
everyone is the same. I
Not
mean,
everyone is the same, and
right,
that's
there's
exactly what.
different needs, different
Correct.
problems.
So we
Is
have to
part
look
of health
at people.
equity also in terms of language and accessibility, because we have so many spoken languages in Montgomery County?
It's one of the elements, absolutely. It's how do we not only provide access to the language that's specific to that person, but also to the care and treatment that's culturally relevant for somebody from a different area of the world. So it's a very complicated idea. It's something that requires everyone in the community to get behind.
So how are you, your organization, working to get the word out to form a coalition instead of, because I imagine there's a lot of working parts that are moving independently and separately.
And I think that's one of the key issues that we have discovered. A lot of different community-based organizations are working towards health equity in their own world, right? They have their own interventions that are helping people, like the homeless folks. They have an intervention that's focused about eradicating that. The behavioral health folks that are focused on youth, they're doing something to provide for the specific segment, educating people about their ability to have an opinion in the ballot. That is all
I'm sorry.
about that.
There was something that you said early on that is a phrase that I'm not entirely familiar with. Social determinants of health?
Yes,
Can you
that's a
explain
public
that?
health terminology, and it is all the different, it's the relationship of all the different circumstantial things that happen to a person that affect their health.
So that
And
would be poverty or
exactly,
where you live.
socioeconomics, genetics,
Education.
education level. So all of those things come into play to affect segments of the population en masse. And that's a term that we use in public health to sort of arrive to the same conclusion. And now health equity is trying to eradicate the social determinants and the disparities.
So you have about 30 seconds left.
So we
or
need
so.
we need
What
all
are-
of the county-led agencies to sort of get behind the idea, to start talking about health in all policy, to talk about how do we change the policies, the environment, and put systems in place that can help us have a healthy community.
Okay, and so with that, we have to take a break, and we'll be right back. And we're back. So, Debbie Ezrin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So tell us about our first responders.
So we are choosing at our annual event next week to honor first responders in Montgomery County because we wanted to shine a light on things that people don't think about. I think people are pretty generally aware of police, fire and rescue personnel, sheriff's office, park police, and thinking about the obvious things they do to protect and serve the community. But we want to make sure that people also realize the integral role they play in addressing homelessness. People who are experiencing homelessness, often first responders are the very first people who encounter them in that moment of crisis, and they then help them get linked to the services they need. And even when people move from the streets into shelters or into permanent housing, a lot of people will still spend time in the community in familiar places and interact with our first responders, and they have relationships with them, and they really help make sure they're getting the help they need. We've had first responders talk to us about folks that they knew who were living outside for long periods of time, and when they finally moved into housing, they would meet them again on the streets just through the normal course of business and say, gosh, they could hardly believe how that person looked and how they acted, and they could see that life had changed, and they're really part of that process, and we want to recognize that.
Well, and you know, I always hear about eradicating homelessness and what that means, and I think most people don't understand what the thought process behind eradicating homelessness is, because it's not really that you can get rid of it so that you never have a homeless person again.
That's right. So it is actually, there is a federal definition created that is followed here in the county and within our organization. And what it says is we're not never going to have a person experience homelessness again, but when it happens, it's going to be a rare, brief, and non-recurring experience. We're going to make sure we set up a system of care that is responsive and that helps people not cycle through emergency systems of care. It's incredibly expensive when people cycle through those systems. homes. Somebody living outside can cost the community $45,000 a year, but when they're in housing, even with rental assistance and case managers in our organization, it's $20,000 to $25,000 a year. That is more humane, it is more cost effective. There is no reason why all communities shouldn't rally around the goal of ending homelessness.
And if you can get someone back on their feet, why not?
That's right. Why shouldn't they be able to have the opportunities that everybody wants to live a life of health and happiness and security? You know, we have a vision in our organization. We talk all the time about helping to build a community where everyone has a safe, stable, and affordable place to call home. And that's something that Montgomery County has done a lot of work to achieve that goal. There is more work to be done, but this community has a lot to be proud of. We have staff who go to national conferences for training, and often they'll hear, "You're from Montgomery County? We hear about what you're doing. It's groundbreaking what's happening in Montgomery County. This is a very exciting community to do the work we're doing in."
I remember the first time that I heard that phrase, housing is healthcare. And it seems like incongruous in a way, and yet what you were talking about with health disparities is true in this case too. If you're rooted somewhere, it's much easier to access services.
That's right. You can't ask somebody, there's a guiding philosophy in our organization. It's a national best practice, and it's called housing first. And it really gets to that exact point. And the idea is you can't ask somebody who's living outside to address all of the complex issues that led them to that experience. They can only begin to do that when they have literally housing first. And then through the stability of having those most basic needs met of food and shelter, then, now we can begin to address, is there a health issue? Is there a mental health issue? Is there addiction? Were they a victim of domestic violence? What was the reason that they're in that experience? And now let's do what we can to help that person move forward in their life and contribute to the community and be part of it.
And you mentioned during break that the fire department has started a new program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. In conversations recently with them, they've told us about how they've recognized that they have people that they call on frequently through the rescue side of fire and rescue, and they call them their frequent flyers, and they set up a system of care, and they've trained firefighters to look out for people who, if that person has called fire and rescue 4 times or more in a given month, there must be a crisis. And they're now for the first time collaborating with the Department of Health and Human Services whenever they flag these individuals. And so sometimes that crisis could be homelessness or at risk for homelessness, it could be anything. But now those two entities are talking to each other and collaborating as a system of care, really looking out for community members' best interests. Yeah. That is something Montgomery County residents can be proud of.
And can it be expanded, say, to police and some of the other?
I think that they're looking at doing all of those things. I think in any system of care, there can be silos, and they're working really hard to break that down so that our organization, for example, one of the many services we provide is we operate the men's emergency shelter on Goody Drive, and so now everybody knows where do they bring clients, because we're breaking down those conversations, and everybody knows that's where you go.
And that's how we get to really reach health equity.
Yes.
By combining efforts and braiding resources and expanding our reach. Do you feel that the community who is not within the homelessness work sphere has a misunderstanding of the problem?
I don't know if it's as much of a misunderstanding as much of a lack of awareness.
Okay.
I think that.
And that's the last word, lack of awareness. Okay. Sorry about the time. Denise Fredericks.
Yes.
Welcome to your own channel.
To my own studio.
So, kind of on the same theme, right?
Yeah.
About mental wellness and awareness.
Awareness, I think, is the big word for me right now. Youth mental health issues are common in all communities. Recent research talks about how in the last handful of years, 5 years, as social media became part of our universe, that adolescent mental health has gone downhill. There are more youth mental health crises than we used to see. So trying to get ahead of that, which we're not, but trying to be part of that awareness and that conversation. We have been funded by the Healthcare Initiative Foundation to do a Youth Mental Wellness Symposium here in this studio on May 15th, focusing on what youth need to know and what they want to know. So the panel we have 2 panels that we'll be doing. One will be a youth-focused panel with youth input mostly, and then we'll have a resource panel with some wonderful folks, both from in our community and outside the community, to talk about how you access those resources, because some of us may know and the rest of us may not have a clue.
So
And
folks from Montgomery County can come and sit in the audience.
you can come and sit in the audience. We really want to fill the audience with youth.
And when you say youth, what age groups are you talking about?
We're targeting this program to middle school and high school, which is not to say there aren't mental health issues younger and older, but that was the target for this conversation. And then there's an accompanying PSA competition, public service announcement.
There you go.
Public service announcement that's meant to be a peer-to-peer conversation about issues related to mental wellness. Adventist Healthcare has funded that particular project.
So there's time for people to submit their entries?
Yes, our original deadline was April 30th, but we are extending that through the end of May because we think there will be a lot of buzz that comes from this conversation at the symposium on the 15th that will encourage, hopefully, the youth in our community to talk about either their experiences or someone else's experiences, and then to attach a resource tag to that. Clearly, Logic, the rapper Logic, who's a local boy, made that famous because he created a song that uses the 1-800 number for outreach.
Right, yeah, that's what I was saying, because a lot of times the focus is what the teacher can do or what the parent can do with somebody else, but a lot of times it's the children themselves or the young adults that actually see what's going on and have more information.
And there is a real power to the peer-to-peer learning that cannot be replicated.
That's a national best practice
Yes.
for a lot of work that we that health organizations do.
Will the symposium be live streamed?
We are going to live stream it, and then we're going to record it. So if you can't be one of the 60 lucky people to sit in our studio audience, you will be able to watch it either live or recorded after. And we are hoping to get a lot of video shares, both of the symposium and of the youth PSA work from the community, because we want to make sure that people have access to both the information and to the resources themselves.
And to get the word out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's so important. There's just so many kids, you hear about it. I feel like all too often suicides at different high schools throughout our community. It's really scary.
And what we find is that the youth are talking to their friends about feeling that they're in crisis. But those friends don't necessarily know what to do or who to talk to. Or you get that, promise me you won't tell anybody else. And I'm thinking, we've got to stop promising that I don't want to save your life, right? So how do we do that? We have to end the stigma of this being something that is exclusive to you and your pain, that this is broader than that, and there's a whole community of people that are there and able to help.
Do you think that when kids say that, though, that, oh, don't tell somebody, do they really mean that, or is that just
Secretly, they
the
want
thing?
you to tell.
Right,
No,
they want
I
you.
really do think that they think that somehow they can manage this themselves, and by telling you, I'll feel better, but I won't feel better. So that's, again, part of the whole conversation. I think some people don't want to know.
And based on that, in the last 30 seconds that we have, I'm sure everyone's thinking, but what about school counselors?
School counselors, there are counselors in the schools, but there are mostly guidance counselors are the people that we think about as those frontline folks. Principals are frontline folks. I talked to a friend of mine, Ed Reed, who's going to be moderating the panel. And he's a school counselor, and he said he talks to people all across the state, and these counselors wish they had more mental health training.
And that's
than
the
they do.
last word you get. We wish we had so much more time to go over more of this because it's such an important issue. So we'll do
Tune
it
in.
again. Tune in, right. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining me this week. And thank you for the audience for joining all of us for this week's edition of Montgomery Weekend Review. I'm Mariana Cordier. Please join us next week at the same time.